What happens when Hollywood bets big and loses bigger? The 1980s gave us blockbusters that changed cinema forever, but it also delivered financial catastrophes so massive they sank entire studios. From a Western that killed a director's career to a duck that quacked its way into infamy, these films burned through cash faster than Wall Street yuppies. Let's count down the spectacular financial failures that defined each year of the decade. Number 10. Heaven's Gate, 1980. Michael Cimino's epic Western didn't just bomb at the box office, it nuked an entire studio. Fresh off his Oscar win for The Deer Hunter, Cimino was given carte blanche for his ambitious tale of the Johnson County War. What followed was perhaps the most notorious production in Hollywood history. The shoot went wildly over schedule as Cimino demanded dozens of takes for even simple scenes. He built an entire town from scratch, then demolished it because the streets were 6 feet too narrow. When an executive visited the set, Cimino hid in a remote location to avoid confrontation about the ballooning costs. The original $11.6 million budget mushroomed to a staggering $44 million. When finally released, Heaven's Gate ran nearly 4 hours. Critics eviscerated it, with Vincent Canby calling it an unqualified disaster. United Artists pulled it after just 1 week, later releasing a butchered 149-minute version that made even less sense. The film earned just $3.5 million against its massive budget. The fallout was nuclear. United Artists, the studio founded by Charlie Chaplin and Mary Pickford, collapsed and was sold to MGM. The era of director-driven Hollywood that began with Easy Rider came to an abrupt end. Studio executives seized back control, and the auteur-friendly 1970s gave way to the producer-dominated 1980s. Time has been kinder to Heaven's Gate. Martin Scorsese and other filmmakers have championed its restored version as a misunderstood masterpiece, but its reputation as the bomb that changed Hollywood remains. Number 9. Pennies from Heaven, 1981. Steve Martin tap dancing in a Great Depression nightmare wasn't exactly what audiences expected from the wild and crazy guy. Fresh off The Jerk's massive success, Martin stunned Hollywood by choosing this dark musical adaptation of Dennis Potter's BBC series, where characters lip-sync to Depression-era songs while living miserable lives. The studio marketed Pennies as another Steve Martin comedy. It wasn't. Instead, viewers got Martin as Arthur Parker, a sheet music salesman who cheats on his frigid wife, fantasizes through elaborate musical numbers, and eventually gets executed for a murder he didn't commit. Talk about a tone shift. MGM sank $22 million into this artistic gamble, creating jaw-dropping musical sequences including one with Martin and Bernadette Peters dancing on giant coins. The choreography was impeccable, the cinematography gorgeous, but audiences fled theaters faster than bank. Runs during the actual Depression. The film grossed a pathetic $9 million, losing MGM about $16 million when marketing costs were factored in. Critics were deeply divided. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars, calling it a bold, haunting film. Others found it pretentious and depressing. Martin later reflected that the audience wasn't ready for a musical in which you couldn't root for anybody. The film's failure sent Martin back to straight comedy for years. Director Herbert Ross, who'd previously made box office gold with Footloose and Steel Magnolias, saw his career cool considerably. Today, Pennies from Heaven is considered a bold experiment that dared to deconstruct the American musical while the country was embracing Reagan-era optimism. The timing couldn't have been worse. Number 8. The Pirate Movie, 1982. Imagine taking Gilbert and Sullivan's The Pirates of Penzance, adding Olivia Newton-John fresh off Grease, throwing in random 80s pop songs, dream sequences, and kung fu fighting pirates. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turns out. The Pirate Movie was an Australian attempt to recapture the Grease magic, with Newton-John playing Mabel, a modern girl who dreams herself into a pirate adventure after hitting her head. There, she falls for Christopher Atkins as the pirate apprentice Frederick. The film inexplicably jumps between period costume drama and contemporary pop numbers, with characters randomly breaking the fourth wall. 20th Century Fox, seeing dollar signs after Grease, invested $8 million and expected a summer hit. Instead, they got a film so tonally confused that audiences couldn't tell if it was parody, tribute, or something altogether unwatchable. The pirate movie scraped together just $1.6 million at the U.S. box office, becoming one of the biggest percentage losers of the decade. Critics were merciless. Roger Ebert awarded it 1 star, writing it was so inept, so distasteful, so terribly written that it's barely watchable. Ted Mahar of The Oregonian called it the worst film musical of the last 40 years. The film's failure temporarily damaged Newton-John's movie career, though she bounced back the following year with Two of a Kind. Director Ken Annakin, once nominated for an Oscar for Battle of the Bulge, never directed another theatrical feature. In recent years, the pirate movie has developed a small cult following who appreciate its sheer weirdness and the how did this get made quality of its existence. Number 7. Krull, 1983. A princess kidnapped by an alien entity called the Beast, a magical 5-pointed weapon called the Glaive, a cyclops who sacrificed an eye to see the future. Krull had everything needed for a Star Wars meets fantasy epic except an audience willing to buy tickets. Columbia Pictures bet big on this bizarre mashup of sci-fi and sword and sorcery, hoping to create a franchise in the wake of Star Wars and Conan the Barbarian. The $30 million budget was enormous for 1983, funding elaborate sets, complex special effects, and an epic James Horner score. The production employed 23 sculptors, 10 painters, and over 400 technicians to create its unique world. The result was a visual feast of wildly uneven quality. Some effects still impress today, others looked dated even in 1983. The Cyclops costume was so cumbersome that actor Bernard Bresslaw couldn't sit down while wearing it and had to rest on a special leaning board between takes. Future James Bond Timothy Dalton and Robbie Coltrane appear in early roles. Krull opened against Return of the Jedi and was crushed, earning just $16.9 million domestically. Critics found it derivative and confusing, though many praised its visual ambition. Vincent Canby of the New York Times called it a gentle, pricey, occasionally funny sci-fi adventure that means to celebrate grand old traditions of heroism. The film's failure didn't stop its cultural impact. Its iconic weapon, the Glaive, has appeared in numerous video games, and Peter Dinklage has named it as his favorite fantasy film. Director Peter Yates, nominated for Oscars for Breaking Away and The Dresser, never attempted another big-budget fantasy, sticking to thrillers and dramas afterward. Krull lives on as the perfect example of 1980s excess, ambitious, expensive, and gloriously weird. Number 6. Dune, 1984. How do you adapt a 412-page science fiction novel filled with complex politics, religious prophecy, and giant sandworms? If you're David Lynch in 1984, you create a bewildering mess that producer Dino De Laurentiis hoped would be Star Wars for adults. Universal and De Laurentiis poured over $40 million into this adaptation of Frank Herbert's classic novel. The production was massive. 80 sets built across Mexico City's Churubusco Studios, 1,700 crew members, and special effects so complex that some shots took 6 months to complete. The worm sequences alone cost millions and required multiple filming techniques. Lynch's original cut ran over 3 hours. Universal panicked and hacked it down to 137 minutes, adding an awkward voiceover to explain the incomprehensible plot. The resulting film was a beautiful disaster. Visually stunning, but narratively impenetrable. First-time viewers had no chance of understanding what was happening, while fans of the book were horrified by the changes. Dune opened to scathing reviews. Roger Ebert gave it 1 star, calling it a real mess, incomprehensible, ugly, unstructured, pointless. It earned just $30.9 million domestically, losing Universal roughly $10–15 million. Lynch was so traumatized by the experience that he turned down Return of the Jedi and has refused to discuss Dune in interviews for decades. The film's failure temporarily stalled Kyle MacLachlan's career, though he and Lynch would later collaborate successfully on Blue Velvet and Twin Peaks. Despite its financial disaster status, Dune has been reassessed as a flawed but fascinating art film. Its production design influenced everything from Star Wars prequels to Mass Effect, and its bold weirdness has earned it cult status. As one fan put it, it's a terrible adaptation of Dune but a fascinating David Lynch film. Number 5. Revolution, 1985. Al Pacino as a fur trapper fighting in the American Revolution sounds like Oscar bait. Instead, it became one of the most notorious flops of the decade, so traumatic that Pacino disappeared from films for 4 years afterward. Revolution had everything going for it on paper. Director Hugh Hudson was fresh off Chariots of Fire, Pacino was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, and the supporting cast included Donald Sutherland and Nastassja Kinski. Warner Brothers and British financiers poured $28 million into this historical epic, filming on location with thousands of extras in elaborate period costumes. The production was plagued by problems from the start. The script was constantly being rewritten, sometimes with pages delivered the morning of shooting. Pacino, playing New York fur trapper Tom Dobb, inexplicably decided not to use a period accent, instead speaking in his modern Bronx drawl. The British weather was abysmal, forcing Hudson to shoot many scenes in the rain, creating a perpetually muddy, gray film. When Revolution hit theaters Christmas 1985, critics were merciless. The Washington Post called it an almost inconceivable disaster. Audiences stayed away in droves. The film earned just $358,574 in the U.S., making it one of the biggest percentage losers in Hollywood history. It effectively ended Hudson's Hollywood career. Pacino later reflected, "I was at a low point in my life. I'd been working on a film that wasn't working and you feel it. I literally couldn't walk properly." He didn't make another film until 1989's Sea of Love, a gap that derailed his career momentum during what should have been his prime years. In 2012, Hudson released a director's cut with narration by Pacino to clarify the confusing plot, but Revolution's reputation as a catastrophic misfire remains intact. Number 4. Howard the Duck, 1986. A new breed of hero, proclaimed the posters. Audiences got something else entirely. A cigar-chomping alien duck with a weirdly human physique and an uncomfortable attraction to Leah Thompson. Howard the Duck wasn't just a bomb. It was a legendary disaster that even George Lucas couldn't save. Fresh off the original Star Wars trilogy, Lucas produced this adaptation of the cult Marvel comic, pouring $37 million into bringing the anthropomorphic duck to life. The production was a nightmare. The duck costumes were so problematic that the main suit operator quit after one day of filming. Multiple actors voiced Howard after the original choice was deemed too raspy. The special effects team worked around the clock to overcome technical limitations. The real problem, though, was tone. The original comic was adult-oriented satire. The film couldn't decide if it was a children's movie, a sci-fi comedy, or something weirder. The result included bizarre scenes like Howard nearly having intimate relations with Thompson's character, a rock concert sequence that stops the plot dead, and a climactic battle with a demon that traumatized younger viewers. Critics demolished it. Leonard Maltin famously reviewed "Hopeless Mess," a gargantuan production that's both too hip and too infantile. The film grossed just $16.3 million domestically, costing Universal roughly $20 million in losses. Executive producer Lucas, needing cash after his divorce and Skywalker Ranch construction, was forced to sell off computer animation division Pixar to Steve Jobs for $10 million, a division later worth billions. Director Willard Huyck and producer Gloria Katz, who had written American Graffiti and Indiana Jones and The Temple of Doom, never directed another film. Despite its failure, Howard has developed a passionate cult following. Marvel Studios boss Kevin Feige has brought Howard back in Guardians of the Galaxy cameos, determined to rehabilitate the character decades after his disastrous debut. Number 3. Ishtar, 1987. Two lounge singers, a CIA plot, a blind camel, a revolutionary war in a fictional Middle Eastern country. Ishtar combined all these elements into what Warren Beatty hoped would be a modern road to Morocco, but instead became shorthand for expensive Hollywood disaster. Columbia Pictures gave director Elaine May an unprecedented budget for a comedy, $55 million. The production immediately went haywire. May insisted on shooting chronologically, first in New York, then in the real Moroccan desert. The desert sequences were nightmarish. Sandstorms destroyed equipment, temperatures soared to 120 degrees, and a vital scene involving a vulture required 50 takes because the bird wouldn't cooperate. Beatty and Dustin Hoffman played talentless songwriters, Simon and Garfunkel wannabes Rogers and Clark. They genuinely worked with composer Paul Williams to write intentionally terrible songs like Dangerous Business and Wardrobe of Love. Hoffman later admitted, "The problem was we all thought we were making a small picture, and then suddenly we were in the desert." When Ishtar finally wrapped, massively over budget and behind schedule, Columbia executives were horrified. Studio head David Putnam, who disliked Beatty, sabotaged the marketing. Before release, the Wall Street Journal published a devastating expose about the troubled production. The film opened to brutal reviews and earned just $14.3 million against its massive budget. The fallout was swift. Columbia lost approximately $40 million. Putnam was fired. May never directed another film. Beatty's career as a leading man never fully recovered. What's fascinating is how Ishtar has been rehabilitated in recent years. Directors like Quentin Tarantino and Martin Scorsese have championed it as an unfairly maligned comedy, with Scorsese calling it a treasure of American cinema. Number 2. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, 1988. Terry Gilliam's fantastical epic about a legendary liar who rides cannonballs and visits the moon almost destroyed the director's career and left Columbia Pictures with a financial black eye that still stings decades later. After the success of Brazil, Gilliam was given $23.5 million to adapt the tall tales of Baron Munchausen. That budget quickly spiraled out of control as Gilliam created increasingly elaborate fantasy sequences, including a dance on the moon with Uma Thurman's Venus, a journey inside a volcano, and a battle against the Turkish army featuring hundreds of extras and giant mechanical heads. The production became legendary for its problems. Sets were destroyed in storms. Actor John Neville was nearly drowned during an ocean sequence. The Italian crew often disappeared for hours during workdays. When Robin Williams arrived on set, Gilliam discovered they had no costume for him. The budget eventually reached somewhere between $47 million, though the exact figure remains disputed. By the time the film was completed, Columbia had undergone executive changes. The new regime, not wanting to promote the previous administration's project, released the film in just 117 theaters. Munchausen earned a paltry $8 million domestically, losing Columbia approximately $38 million. Critics were divided. Some called it visually spectacular but narratively incoherent. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 stars, writing, "The special effects are astonishing. This is one of the most beautiful films ever made." The film received 4 Academy Award nominations for its technical achievements. Gilliam's career went into temporary free fall. He couldn't get financing for years and battled studios on every subsequent project. Yet Munchausen has been reassessed as a misunderstood masterpiece. Gilliam has maintained that studio sabotage, not his vision, doomed the film. The problems came from the fact that no one was ever honest. No one ever said, "We don't want to make this film." Number 1. The Abyss, 1989. James Cameron went from aliens to the ocean depths with this ambitious underwater sci-fi epic that nearly drowned its cast, crew, and studio's finances. Fox gave Cameron $41 million to make his passion project about deep-sea oil workers encountering an alien species. That budget would nearly double before completion. The production was legendary for its difficulty. Cameron built the world's largest underwater filming tank in an abandoned nuclear reactor facility, filling it with 7.5 million gallons of water. The cast, including Ed Harris and Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, spent hours submerged daily, often battling claustrophobia and exhaustion. Harris reportedly nearly drowned in one scene and later punched Cameron in the face. Mastrantonio had a breakdown on set, screaming, "We are not animals," before storming off. The grueling shoot lasted 140 days, with crew working 70-hour weeks underwater. Cinematographer Al Giddings developed decompression sickness. Cameron's perfectionism pushed everyone to the breaking point. The budget ballooned to $70 million, enormous for 1989. When The Abyss opened, its original 171-minute cut had been trimmed to 140 minutes, removing crucial plot elements explaining the alien presence. Critics praised its groundbreaking effects, but found the story confusing. The film earned just $54.5 million domestically, far short of profitability when marketing costs were included. The fallout wasn't as severe as other entries on our list. Cameron survived the box office disappointment and went on to make Terminator 2 and Titanic. Fox eventually recouped most costs through home video, especially after releasing Cameron's superior 171-minute special edition in 1993, which restored the film's environmental message and clarified the alien storyline. What makes The Abyss remarkable is that despite its commercial failure, it pioneered CGI water effects that revolutionized filmmaking. The liquid tentacle sequence represented the first photorealistic CGI character in cinema history, paving the way for Terminator 2's T-1000 and eventually Jurassic Park's dinosaurs. As Cameron himself noted, The Abyss was the proving ground for all the CGI work that came after. From a duck that almost destroyed Marvel's movie future to an underwater epic that changed CGI forever, these bombs weren't just financial disasters, they were fascinating failures. Which of these flops do you think deserved a better fate? And here's a question worth debating. Did these box office bombs actually save Hollywood by teaching studios crucial lessons, or did they kill creative risk-taking for decades to come? Hit that subscribe button and battle it out in the comments.